The words I think of when I think of my mother is perseverance. When she decided that she wanted to do this business, she would work at it as hard as she could. Everything she did was 100%.
My mother, Jane, was born in Waimea on the Big Island. My grandfather was the carpenter for Parker Ranch.
And so we always laughed about her saying that she used to ride horses before she could swim. So it was a very rural upbringing in the beginning.
And the way she used to say it was Parker Ranch, so we didn't know it was Parker Ranch. We thought it was Parker Ranch.
And she lived on the Big Island until the age of 11 and then moved over to Honolulu.
But it was good for her future because she ended up going to a business college, Honolulu Business College. I think deep down inside, she always was an entrepreneur. By the time she was 14, she actually was working at a soda fountain shop. And she was so efficient that the owner actually gave her the keys to the shop and she opened and closed the shop. From the beginning when they first met to the end, it was a true love story. She was about 19 when she met him, and Dad was about 5 years older. So they met at a party. My father's friends were playing a pretty risque game, so my mother didn't join in. And my father, being the quiet type, he didn't join either. So they kind of met each other that way, but it was a love at first sight type of relationship. They were wanting to date, but our mother's parents were very much against them going out. And so for the 2 years leading up to their engagement, Dad was actually outside and he was not allowed in the home.
People who came in from Japan, they were very territorial. If a woman was from Kumamoto, she should be dating a man from Kumamoto. And so the mere fact that my father had Okinawan roots didn't quite, gel well with my grandparents. So my father was drafted by the San Francisco Seals, somewhere in between AAA and a Major League Baseball team today. And they sent him out to the Salt Lake City Bees.
So when Mom snuck out to go visit him in Salt Lake City, that came out in the paper because Dad did so well. And so then it said that it must have been because Jane Iwashita came out to visit him, and so her parents were horrified.
And the manager, Lefty O'Doul, was very close to General MacArthur, who led the Allied occupational forces in Japan. General MacArthur felt that the Japanese needed to learn from an American baseball player. And that's when Lefty O'Doul recommended my father. So my father moved to Japan in 1951 and played for the Tokyo Yomiuri Giants. He was the first Japanese American to play in post-war Japan.
So he went by himself and he wrote her a letter every single day. And so after a whole year of him writing her every day, her parents gave in. They said he must be a good guy if he's going to be that dedicated to her.
In 1952, he returned to Hawaii, and that's when he got married to my mother in February of 1952, and then took her back to Japan with him. My mother, who grew up naturally in Parker Ranch, Kalihi, ends up at the age of 21 in Tokyo. Can't speak Japanese that much, doesn't know her way around the city, a huge city. And then my father, he's right in the midst of his baseball season, and he's not at home for, the first 40 days.
So she sucked it up and decided she was going to make the most of it.
My mother loved pearls. I mean, most women do. And naturally, she was in the heart of that whole market, being in Japan. And when she would wear her pearls and go back to return to Hawaii, people would just buy it off of her neck. And, there were a lot of people who would come in from Hawaii and they'd be asking her about where to buy pearls, because that was the thing to do in Japan. And she would guide them to all these different stores. And it was at that time, Dr. Ching got to know my mother quite well and said, what are you going to do? Are you going to just be this, tour guide going forward? Or, why don't you start your own business?
So her business started actually in 1964. And it was through the help of Dr. Wo Ching, who was the CEO of Aloha Airlines. And his hobby was to invest a portion of his money to new entrepreneurs.
Well, starting a business in Japan, especially a woman starting a business, is not a very easy thing. And, it is a very male-dominated business community. So my mother decided to name it after my father because he was very well known in Japan, and so named it Wally Yonamine Pearls. And that allowed her to deal quite a bit with all the pearl vendors, and they would give her some credit as a result of that.
And later on, as things progressed for her and her business became very, very popular, people would just call it Jane's Pearls.
She moved into a building called the France Building in Roppongi. It was the tallest building in Roppongi at the time. When we closed the business, it was the shortest building. So first and foremost, she was extremely customer-centric. She would treat customers the way she would want to be treated, and she lived by that code. The way she engages with customers, she tries to teach them about pearls and educate them and give them value.
She would truly try to find something that would fit each person. And so one of the things she did that she started was every customer had a log, and she would keep what each person bought so that she wouldn't sell the same thing to this returning customer. And in those days, that was because most of her customers were businessmen. In the 60s, that when American customers would come to Japan often.
She started first to get a lot of famous baseball and other sports figures coming to the store to buy pearls.
So she had 4 presidents of the United States she sold to.
Singers like Carly Simon, James Taylor, John Denver, to movie stars like Tom Cruise, Harrison Ford, Jodie Foster, and her all-time favorite was Elizabeth Taylor. Consumers in Japan demand perfection.
She was a tough boss. She really was a tough boss, but she did it very lovingly. She would teach us how to string and knot pearls. So we learned it. Unbeknownst to us, she was teaching us how to work with pearls. From the time I was 12, Wallace was 9, and we just started helping her. And so then what we did was we started a small little business on Rodeo Drive. And so we had a small shop there, but it just got so expensive being on Rodeo. So Wallace and I decided that we wanted to move someplace closer. So we moved our business to Redondo Beach.
My father was a super athlete, and I did not inherit those athletic genes. But I could tell you that I learned a lot from my mother on business. In a certain way, she was my role model in terms of accountability, thinking like an owner, being customer-centric, and then also having that decisiveness. We had the store for a total of 55 years. Unfortunately, the last 3 years, she fell ill and she had a stroke and she wasn't able to work. And my wife actually filled in to look after things, and naturally with a lot of help from my sisters. So we closed the business roughly about a year before COVID hit. Many years later, after they both passed, I found out that my mother was actually the breadwinner of the family. She was paying all the bills. My father didn't do bad, but my mother did extremely well. But I was quite impressed that she always kept that only to herself.
For me, I always think of her as strong and resilient because she had to be strong in order to be a female in the 60s to start a business.
My father was a great human being, but my mother was really the rock of the family.
When it came to the family, that was what really kept her together. She was always there for the family.
I'd be so proud about, being with my mother because she had this elegance. She was a classy woman.
I feel so proud of her being a female, starting a business on her own, coming from Paca Ranch and, doing something like that. And it's so nice to see so many women so happy wearing her pearls and that she could do a business that made people happy.